Hello, welcome again to Sport Unlocked with Martyn Ziegler from the Times and Tariq Panja from the New York Times, freshly back from Rome, and myself, Rob Harris from Sky News, who wasn't at the European Club Association meeting, or what's it been rebranded now?
Everton Football Club, EFC.
European Football Clubs. What have you been this week, Rob?
Well, apart from meeting the new regulator for English football, David Cogan, I was at a tribute dinner for Gary Lineker and Jill Scott, the Legends of Football, which was raising money for the Nordoff and Robbins music therapy charity. And we heard John Barnes doing his own version of the World in Motion rap from the Italian 90 England World Cup song.
Could you still remember it, Rob? How did it go?
It was incredible. He was able to riff absolutely perfectly in front of the many hundreds of diners.
Funny enough, Ziggs, did we not see Jill Scott as well?
Yes, we did see Jill Scott. She was in Rome as part of the European Football Club's special overlap appearance. I had a chat with her on the way in, but seemed like a very nice person.
It was a remarkable appearance. Jill, Ian Wright, Roy Keane, Gary Neville, the regulars, were joined by Marcel Desailly, former Chelsea and France legend, World Cup winner. He had some pretty incredible things to say. But I left there thinking he wanted to microchip professional footballers and have complete control over their lives because they're paid so much money. He was. I mean, I think Roy Keane and gave him some sideways looks like that. Gary Neville was trying to get at what he was saying. Essentially, Marcel Desailly was saying, these players, we pay them so much money, the owners have a right to control every aspect of their lives.
That does seem extremely intrusive, although unlike some of the conferences we go to, some thought-provoking points at least put out there for discussion at the event.
Pretty much.
Including, he said they already knows how much they sleep and what they eat, but, he seemed to be saying what kind of music they listen to.
But it has been a week of awards, not just Legends of Football. Unfortunately, we all missed out on the Nobel Prize for Literature.
Well, I can't believe that you didn't get it for some of your fantastic online reports, Rob.
Well, it's actually Tariq who manages to get thousands of words, which we might not be able to get to in a boost.
Very occasionally.
And disappointment in the Nobel Peace Prize for someone in football as well.
Yes, Gianni Infantino, the FIFA president, he took it to his favourite platform, Instagram, to say that Donald Trump, did he say, must get the Nobel Prize after his role in what we hope is brokering peace in the 2-year war in Gaza. Infantino was in Rome. He was there for the EFC Congress, like Alexander Sheffer and the US president the day before.
And most interestingly, you got a chance to talk to him after last week's episode featured What Would You Ask Gianni Infantino if you had a chance to see him?
I did, but this was like a rolling mall. If you're not a rugby fan, this is where a large number of people are sort of rolling through the field. Here we were rolling through the Waldorf Hotel in Rome. I did manage to collar him, and sometimes you have to be on the news. This appearance from Gianni Infantino came a few days before crucial World Cup qualifier in Norway, where Israel's national team are playing, and another one a few days later in Udine, where they're going to play Italy. Both will feature protests, so we had to ask him about the prospects for those games, the peace agreement that his great friend Donald Trump might have negotiated.
In terms of the World Cup qualifiers in Norway, do you think this news will hopefully calm things down?
Definitely. I mean, ceasefire agreement, first phase of peace agreement. It's fantastic news. I mean, really great news for the entire world, for everyone. I mean, the effort of everyone involved, started from President Trump to Qatar, Egypt, Turkey, all the countries. Palestinians, Israelis, everyone.
Italy have got the game here in Udine on Tuesday, I think, and there was a general strike last week, and there's worries about that game as well. What would be your message ahead of that game in Udine?
Well, now there is everyone should be happy about that. and everyone should support the process. Now we need, those who have the responsibilities do these steps. They have done it, and now everyone else should support it. I think this is, goes beyond football, but includes football as well.
The other thing you asked him about, Tariq, was something he'd actually referenced in his speech to the clubs about the international calendar, and actually saying, we need to look at the options about you can't just play always in July, because some parts of the world you can't play then, some parts you can't play in December. So, and he sort of said, actually, perhaps in Europe, you should be able to use June more. So the idea may be shifting the calendar, play some club football in June, and be able to have World Cups in the winter, which it's not the worst idea at all. I think it makes sense.
Well, let's hear from Gianni Infantino himself.
Your message there today was interesting on the calendar. It seems pretty obvious for the World Cup, they can't be played in some places in the summer. So we're going to have to change the calendar. When do you think, so the Saudi World Cup could be in October or December like Qatar was. When will we get into the nitty-gritty of that?
We are already into the nitty-gritties. We are discussing all the time. And I think it's not just about one World Cup. I think it's a general reflection. Even to play in some European countries in July is very, very hot. So maybe we have to think, or actually the best months to play football, which is June, usually is not used very much, right? In Europe, I'm speaking about Europe. So maybe there are ways we can optimize.
So obviously things are heading towards a winter 2034 World Cup, or maybe 2035 when Saudi Arabia has to play it.
I think he made a lot of sense, to be honest with you. And I think a lot of people will agree with that. It's not just for European football to decide when football is played, and climate change is obviously a real thing. And he made a really good point as well. I thought it's not just Saudi Arabia in 2034. If you look at where the World Cup is going to be in 2030, which is majority of it at least is going to be in Spain, Morocco and Portugal. Of course, those first games in South America in their winter. But parts of Spain, parts of Portugal, parts of Morocco are going to be extremely hot in the window when the World Cup is traditionally played. So we might see some movement there as well.
Late 30 degrees, it could even hit 40 degrees potentially for that World Cup.
Absolutely. That would be no surprise.
He was also asked by Andrew Dampf from the Associated Press, who's based in Rome, about the issue of overseas games. So that's obviously a big one as well, isn't it, this week?
That's because this week we had UEFA reluctantly, as they saw it, approving Villarreal and Barcelona to play their La Liga match in Miami in December, and for AC Milan and Como to play their Serie A match in Perth, Australia in February. Effectively, they said they didn't want to do it, but they had to because the FIFA regulations weren't clear in terms of whether or not they could block it or not. But Gianni Infantino suggesting he didn't really want to approve it either.
We have a structure whereby we have games at national level, at continental level, and then at global level. And this is a structure that made football the number one sport in the world. If we want to break this structure, we take a big risk. If we want to regulate it, then, we have to look into it. We're speaking with all the stakeholders. I have my personal opinion, which I will not share with you right now. But now I've seen that UEFA has approved it. It has to go to CONCACAF as well to approve this game. I don't know if AFC has approved the game in Australia. All the stakeholders, and then it will come to FIFA for its approval. But that's one game. I think we need a reflection which is more global on what do we want to do. Do we want everyone to play everywhere and do whatever he wants? I mean, it's fine. FIFA is pretty strong in this respect. Or do we want to have a regulated system which takes into account the interests of everyone at national level, continental level, and club level, but also the legitimacy of everyone to organize events and to regulate the sport in their own country, continent.
They were trying to say, this is, we have to approve these, but we may not approve others in the future. That seemed to be the message.
To be honest, no one has explained still why they had to approve this. This press statement was very funny because the title was UEFA expresses opposition to overseas games. We had to go 3 paragraphs down to realize they actually have approved these games, which also have the requirement of CONCACAF, the confederation in North America, where the game is going to be played, the Villarreal Barcelona one, they've said they're still studying it. They haven't had an application yet. And that they've not said they're going to approve it. And I guess the AFC, is it for the game in Perth, given it's going to be hosted by Australia? We haven't heard from them. But it was a weird one, Rob.
And Alexander Shefrin, the UEFA president, spoke about it at the European Football Clubs meeting, again reflecting how he doesn't want to be taking football away from the communities that their heartland is in the domestic leagues. And it does seem perhaps everyone's just fearing legal action if they do block these matches, yet the entity that's common to both sides of the discussion is relevant. They're the marketing agency that are helping to promote La Liga in the United States, and also the partners now with UEFA on Champions League rights and other European competitions.
Great point. And this is where I've yet to get an understanding of UEFA's position here. Relevant, and this process, I think, started as long ago as 2018. They were the people that sued in the US to get these games on. They were the ones that had this kind of everyone backs away from the court case agreement with FIFA. FIFA isn't saying it's backing it. FIFA is opposed to this. So UEFA knew that this company that is diametrically opposed to it on overseas games and still decided they are exactly the right partner for this massive commercial agreement for all of the European club competitions and Champions League, selling these rights, which, Martyn, we got some more details of this week. But strange partners when you do not agree with them on this something as fundamental as this.
Well, maybe if you think they're going to deliver you gazillions, it's worth, you can swallow your pride and your beliefs in order to get the extra cash. I don't know, but I mean, we did actually speak to relevant people about this in August, me and Rob, and they were saying, "Oh, this is it's just a one-off. It's just very small numbers." But yeah, just to go back to the new sort of there's a tender going to come out in the next few days about the new European club competition rights. The sort of biggest one, I think, is this thing of having a streaming platform going to be able to buy the global rights to the first choice match every Tuesday. Obviously designed to appeal to one of these big digital platforms. From what I understand, Netflix has already been contacted to gauge their interest, and they've sort of indicated they would be interested. Amazon the same.
They both do have rights in Europe already, don't they? But in individual markets. Yes,
in England, Germany and Italy. They don't pay very much, though, actually. So it's be interesting to see if this is going to be the cash cow that the UEFA hopes.
The one thing you got a sense of from that UEFA announcement is how long the right cycle will be. It's 6 years, isn't it?
Potentially, but not necessarily. We've seen a 6-year deal with the US rights already. Sources say it's going to be between 3 years and 6 years, depending on what people want.
People I spoke to at that meeting, the longer ones are likely to be 4 years. People were saying it's going to be like the Bundesliga, where you have a longer 4-year contract. We're used to 3-year agreements across the board. The CBS one, as you said, is the largest. But just back to relevant, I think it's going to be a real tall order, though, to get those numbers. You mentioned they didn't get much money from these streaming agreements so far. They're looking at almost $1 billion more than they're currently generating. So it's going to be one to watch.
And this plays into the interview I did with David Cogan, who's the new regulator of English football, who talked about his role largely being about financial stability. And while often we reflect on rogue owners, those who don't fulfill their financial promises, he says one of his roles is to look at the risks posed by the value of TV rights coming down. Because as we've often seen, if there's less competition in the market, like in France, well, the value comes down. So while clubs might think they're getting a lot now, those who are bidding for the rights certainly aren't going to overpay.
Well, no, that France is a very good example, because I think we might have mentioned before that the basic PSG, Paris Saint-Germain, are going to get from the French domestic rights is just £4 million. It's incredibly small compared to Premier League.
And as we've already seen, the Bundesliga has had to give away some of its rights to content creators. Mark Goldbridge in the UK is showing matches live, and this you see board, which is the joint entity between European football clubs and UEFA, said that part of their strategy is about new global digital first entrants offering differentiated fan propositions. So that would indicate they want to get, in some form, European clips, whether it's live or just highlights, on the platforms of these content creators that they would see as engaging with the young audiences. And I get the impression they do like how CBS in the US have particularly helped to sort of grow awareness of the Champions League with some of those more sort of playful clips.
Yeah, and don't forget, UEFA has a lot more properties than the Champions League in this UC3. It's also going to include the Europa League and the Conference League, and maybe you can try some of this stuff with maybe the lesser inventory that they've got there.
So they're now going to go around the broadcasting world to try to see how much they can raise, even though the new Champions League format's only just begun about a year ago.
Yeah, I mean, the numbers are massive, aren't they? They're expecting to get at least 5 billion euros a year. That's up from about 4.4. I mean, some reports say it's going to be much higher than that even, but I think a 10% rise, I think UEFA would be happy with that.
And Gianni Infantino said the first Club World Cup generated 2 billion euros. In 30 years, he expects it will generate 200 billion euros.
Lucky he's got a crystal ball.
You do. Luckily, he's got Saudi Arabia as well. Only joking. But the issue of the Club World Cup and its growth is linked to Saudi Arabia, the deal with DAZN and all the sponsors. Now, I was wondering, I was raising this with people, Saudi Arabia has not been involved in European football rights when it comes to UEFA. So this big increase that they're hoping for, I can't see it happening without Saudi Arabia.
And we had the accounts published this week from DAZN.
Do they make a profit?
No. Funny enough, Zeke, no.
But they have narrowed their losses from $1.4 billion lost to $936 million lost last year.
Tiny. But there was also the £500 million investment from Len Blavatnik, the owner, taking his total investment into this company, or the losses he's funded, to $7 billion. It's such an enormous number. He's got to hope that number pays dividends in the end.
No, it is incredible. I mean, and it is something that is going to be a key thing, all this money, for the future of European and English football.
But certainly in Rome, it looked like there's plenty of money around what was the European Club Association, now European Football Clubs. There was a drone show, music acts, and all to celebrate this rebrand, which Nasser Al-Khalifi, the chair of EFC, said, "Our name finally matches our purpose, and our purpose matches our name." How was it then around the events?
ChatGPT, give me a slogan and a speech. No, you mentioned it felt excessive. So I went to the first ECA meeting back in 2008, small business hotel in Geneva. I think I might have been the only journalist there that day, maybe a local Swiss reporter popped down. It was almost half an afternoon, if that, 30 football executives. There were more than 820 clubs invited to this thing. It's probably north of 1,000 people here. At the hotel, the Waldorf Astoria, where some of them stayed, was obviously very luxurious. And they had another rich benefactor, Rob. Some of those shows, some of those meals were funded by the Roma owner, Dan Friedkin. Also, the EFC owner, the Everton owner, not different EFC, he funded quite a lot of this, didn't he? Martyn, what did you make of it?
Maybe that's why they did it. EFC, Everton Football Club, European Football Clubs. The one good thing, anyway, is that it means the ECA will no longer get complaints from the European Circus Association and the European Cheerleading Association, both of who had previously written to express their concern about the ECA acronym being used.
Just the People's Club might be aggrieved.
Yeah, well, they're going to get a letter from Everton one of these days. Maybe Dan can give Dan the letter, change his hats. But also the other big thing here is everyone was there. It felt like the morning of a Champions League final. There were financiers, there were other investors, there were these legends. It felt like a very, very big football event, which is what I think that they're going for, almost like there's another governing body.
But there was a rival event at the same time. It was going on at the Football Museum in Manchester, and it's where more than 100 English clubs are all gathered to meet the new independent regulator for the men's game, David Cogan, and his organisation. It's not just one person. More than 4 years in the making, from the Conservative government to the Labour government, it's now getting into existence.
Yeah, it's. So I think you went to interview him, didn't you, Rob? Well, was he aware of this sort of massive weight of expectation from like football fans that the regulator is going to come in and solve all the problems, and Sheffield Wednesday, Morecambe, these things are never going to happen?
Well, he actually said that everyone's going to think he's got a magic wand, but he said the remit is pretty tightly defined and he can't do things like intervene on VAR decisions, the cost of meat pies or ticket prices. He also said he can't get involved in the human rights issues that might surround certain potential owners. He said absolutely nothing to do with the human rights because of the remit and how it was adapted in terms of not having to align with foreign policy. But he said they're very much focused on financial stability. And he said he didn't want to talk about Sheffield Wednesday and issues with their owner, Dejphon Chansiri. But then he did effectively say they would intervene when he's got the powers in place to be able to do so, with all sorts of concerns as they drift on the lower league club and their inability and to pay wages, delayed payments to players, but still managing to get through the season.
Yeah, he called them, his words, one of the biggest brands in English football. Sheffield Wednesday, of course, one of the oldest, one of the most storied clubs in English football. But when he said when he gets the powers, as someone who has followed it as closely as you, what does that mean? What powers is he going to get, and when does he get these powers?
Yeah, it still has to go through the final sort of parliamentary act, basically, to deliver these powers to so it becomes a fully statutory body.
Although David Cogan has started the role while his appointment is still under investigation by the Commissioner for Public Appointments. Now, he said there's no impropriety against himself, but there were issues about why he was appointed despite not being on the original shortlist, and then it only emerged in his effectively parliamentary confirmation hearing that he had donated to the leadership campaigns of Sir Keir Starmer, who went on to become Prime Minister, and Lisa Nandy, who went on to become Culture Secretary.
Yeah, he's also donated to Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor. So I think he was described in the Select Committee by the chairwoman, Caroline Dinage, as Labour Party aristocracy. So, that is why there is an investigation into the appointment, but not the appointment itself. I actually did a Freedom of Information request to with my colleague, Joey Durso, about the asking for documents relating to the appointment process. And we were told there were 10 documents and emails, but they were exempt because they would they'd stop officials feeling safe in offering candid advice about appointments if they knew this was going to potentially end up in the public domain.
Problem is, it might have been discussing whether one of us was most suitable. Because David Cogan did start out in journalism. He was a producer on BBC News programmes in the 80s.
Rob, did he also meet the clubs then? Well, he was supposed to meet the professional football clubs, is that correct?
Yeah, he did, although Gary Neville, who was a big advocate for the regulator, he's one of the owners at Salford City, was with you instead doing the overlap.
Yeah, and it had been mentioned actually, not once, but several times. People did notice saying that it was a little bit strange. He's been one of the most outspoken public figures on this issue more generally, a big advocate of the regulator and the role of the regulator, and people wondering why he wasn't there as the owner of Salford. So that'd be interesting to find that out.
You can hear the full 15 minutes of the interview on the Sky News YouTube channel. I've linked to it on my own socials as well.
So, Tariq, after we've been in Rome, you've flown straight off to Oslo in Norway ahead of this potentially tricky qualifier with Israel. Interesting to see if the sort of ceasefire deal which has been announced this week, if that has much effect on the protests, and what kind of thing have you picked up?
Yeah, we're recording this before the game actually kicks off, so when people listen to this, it might be different time, and we'll know what happened. So this is the game between Norway and Israel here in Oslo, as you said, Martyn. And the backdrop has been the peace talks, this hopefully imminent peace in that region. But it seems there will be protests both here in Oslo and on Tuesday when Israel head off to Italy to play the Italian national team in Udine, and they're expecting protests there as well. It's been really interesting in a sense. Lisa Klaveness, the Norwegian FA president, had to, she didn't have to, she chose to appear in front of the press here, both the Israeli press and the Norwegians. She had quite a tough grilling from the Israeli side, saying, effectively, it was what one guy was saying, look, you don't know what the issue is, why are you so outspoken? And she said, why are you against Israel? And she said, she's not against Israel. She said, she's a lawyer, a former judge, and wants to see a rules-based order in football. And that's where she's been. And then she was kind of also had to set the record straight, Rob, which was really interesting, where she said the Israeli FA president, he had said she hadn't offered any sympathies for what happened on October the 7th. She said she did it on the day, the first anniversary and the second anniversary we've seen as well. So it was quite a spiky press conference. But talking to Israeli colleagues afterwards, they said it was interesting to hear her say it and important that for them to hear her, she was a different person to what they had imagined some of the people said as well. So that was quite fascinating. Of course, we get the Israeli players, the captain and the manager. They're talking about what a moment it is for the announcement that the final hostages can be released. And that is such a big deal for them and their nation.
Well, Lise Klaveness showing the advantage of a dialogue. So for the Israeli journalists in particular to have a chance to be able to question her rather than seeing perhaps quotes that are only partial, that are sort of filtered out around the world, their own chance to get a sense of just what her own perspective is, the fact that, well, she can assure them that she's not against Israel existing.
Absolutely. It was not political in that sense. She's someone, as we've known for the last 2 or 3 years, she's taken on these causes like the migrant worker cases in Qatar and here now. It's linked to the rules of football. She said she only talked about Qatar because that's where the World Cup was going to be. And that's why it becomes an issue for them. And also, the interesting thing is her role, the Norwegian Football Association, the board, their position is human rights are a thing that they are going to talk about. She's a representative of them, so she's doing that. That was also fascinating to hear.
And she was part of those leading the drive to get Israel suspended from UEFA, to stop Israeli teams playing in national team competitions, club competitions. Those efforts only really picked up a pace just at the exact point the peace talk started to accelerate, and also when we heard from the Trump administration that they would intervene to block it. So the hopes of a vote on Israel's participation then quickly faded away. So it will now be interesting to see twofold what happens to that movement to get Israel suspended from international football. Does that fade away if this peace deal does fully take effect, does last? And perhaps at these matches over the next week, we'll also see a reflection of wider society, those who've been protesting against Israel, particularly over the last 2 years. Do they continue the protest? Do the pro-Palestinian protests adopt different messaging if the war has come to an end?
It's interesting you said she was asked about this, about that sudden momentum that you described. She was like, we and when she said we, her and Norwegian FA, been quite consistent for 2 years, saying that's always been their position. They hadn't changed. That just others decided to join them in the last way. And I said, well, where did the momentum come from? And she says she didn't know. Which is also interesting. But we have seen the political winds change in certain countries as well.
And a focus has been on the number of deaths in Gaza, including footballers, the sports facilities destroyed, while the Israeli FA insists it is unconnected to the war launched by Israel following the October the 7th attacks by Hamas 2 years ago.
Israel are going to Italy next week. The amount of protests there are ramping up. In fact, the ECA Congress, or the EFC Congress, we should say now, was delayed. The dinner was delayed. They had to walk the last mile because they were stuck in these traffic jams. And the organizer said because there were protests in Rome that day. That shows there is a change. In Spain, there's been a change. So maybe it's bigger politics outside of football that is having an effect on some of these football associations. But from the Norwegian perspective, they've always held the same position, effectively.
And not the only big political game in World Cup qualifying this weekend in Europe.
Yeah, absolutely. It's you go to Belgrade, or go to Serbia, a game that would normally be in Belgrade, where the Serbian team play their home games, has been moved to a much smaller stadium in, I think, in the north of the country. Political football theatre here. Albania are in town for a World Cup qualifier. The teams were drawn together. Several years ago, this game was marred, a qualifier between the teams, when a drone was flown over the stadium with a flag and had to be abandoned. So, yep, both games taking place within hours of each other. Norway, Israel kicking off locally at 6 p.m. and Serbia, Albania at 9 p.m. over there in Serbia.
But it's also fraught in Asian qualifying with a bit of disquiet over why Qatar and Saudi Arabia have home advantage for the final part of qualifying there.
Yeah, any guesses as to why Qatar and Saudi Arabia have home advantage? Yeah, so this is the closing stages of the Asian football qualifiers for the World Cup. And the way it's going to work is there's 2 places left, and there's going to be these 2 groups of 4 teams, I think. And the winners of each group are going to go to USA, Canada, and Mexico next summer. And what's really interesting is not only do Saudi Arabia and Qatar play their games at home, they also somehow have lucked out in having 6 days break between each of their games, whereas the other teams have 72 hours. And the Oman coach, for example, Carlos Queiroz, has spoken out about this, saying this is completely unfair, but there's nothing we can do about it.
He's told The Guardian, are there no stadiums in Japan or Kuwait where we could play? Maybe the people who organise this have a different vision of football. There is a logic, isn't there? Asia is a big confederation going all the way from Japan to Lebanon and obviously featuring Australia as well. So it makes sense to some degree to be able to bring some of the opponents together to play their matches in closer proximity. But it has been pointed out there are questions over the process, because apparently Indonesia, Iraq, Oman and the UAE also expressed interest in hosting, or they wanted neutral venues for these mini groups.
Of course, it makes sense to have them in one place, if given the geography of Asia, as you say. But as Carlos Queiroz said, are there no stadiums in Kuwait or Japan? Japan, of course, have qualified there, that they happen to have to be there. It is a reminder, though, of the power of Saudi Arabia to bring these events and to get advantage somehow for these. Saudi Arabia, of course, a big sponsor of the AFC. Let's just make that clear. The Asian Champions League changed as well, let's not forget. So this format of the Asian Champions League ends with a competition in Saudi Arabia. So the Saudis' club teams also have an advantage when it comes to the Champions League, with these final matches all being played on their territory.
And in another bizarre twist this week, Turki Al-Sheikh, the Saudi sports chief, suddenly going on X to say that Manchester United were in advanced stages of talks about a takeover. We didn't expect perhaps him to be dangling a bit of football takeover gossip.
Maybe he realised how many followers you can get by trading in transfer gossip, and he thought he'd stick a flyer out. But it set the hairs racing, didn't it? And then he had to set another one out to say that it wasn't him that was bidding for Manchester United. It was just something he'd heard. You know, he is such a... It's weird. He's an influential man in sport, though, isn't he, Rob? This is a man who spends money in sport. Boxing, tennis. He's a government minister, in fact, isn't he, in Saudi Arabia for entertainment.
And potentially market-moving information with Manchester United listed on the New York Stock Exchange. He might have just realised, like many people, during an international break in the men's game, a bit of Manchester United news does well for clicks and hits.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we've only mentioned them right at the end of the pod.
There you go. We could do a lot better. So what is it, people, if they like and enjoy the podcast,
rate, review, subscribe, spread the word, and message us at Sport Unlocked on all the social platforms, sportunlockpod@gmail.com.
And Turkey, if you'd like to spread the word about the pod, that's over to you as well, pal.
Absolutely. But for now, thank you for listening, especially Turkey Al Sheikh if he is in Saudi Arabia. Goodbye for now.